For untold epochs in the human story, there has been a consistent principle among mankind, that being tribe and community. For better and for worse, this is how we as humans are hardwired. We are ultimately social creatures, and we function best when around a smaller, tight knit group of like minded people, or on our own as individuals. This is how it has been since the beginning. But what happens when human civilization becomes so detached from nature that it atomizes a large portion of those who reside within it? We as humans are meant to have individual freedom. To be able to carve our own destinies is paramount to who we are as a species. Losing this, we progressively become but husks of what our ancestors were. Free nomads upon the plains. Farmers and traders who braved the seas to unknown lands. Strong and wise hunters and gatherers, and so much more. This is who we are. Yet now look at us. Like domesticated animals, we reside in cages that we ourselves have built. But what started this process of surrendering our minds to a vague governmental deity? From here, I shall explore from the perspective of the United States. However, this pretty much applies to the majority of the world. I would like to explore 3 turning points in US history that I believe have contributed heavily towards creating the Matrix. First of all, what do I mean by Matrix? I am utilizing this term to mean a false reality created to distract a populace from some kind of overarching truth or truths. And in this definition, I am not saying that we live in an actual computer program like in the Matrix films, but rather a matrix that we ourselves have both knowingly and unknowingly forged here in our world. The turning point of the free United States into the dystopia that it is today began in the late 19th century. With the advent of compulsory factory school systems nationwide, thanks to figures like Whig Party member Horace Mann and John D. Rockefeller, who both lobbied heavily for the founding of forced public schooling. Then what was once a decentralized educational system of local community schools turned into a purposefully built 12-year assembly line where children were to be treated like product and shaped into a standardized citizenry befitting a world of conglomerates and the employee and manager way of thinking. All founded upon the Prussian factory school system that had been created for the exact reason of enslaving young people's minds so that they will become obedient workers. And so one is branded with a social security number at birth and put through the factory process just like cattle. It is also known that those who fund the public school system are the same kinds of wealthy families that share intimate ties with the Federal Reserve banking system. A system that was created in 1913 and marked a stark change in not just US history, but of the world itself. And eventually the gold standard that was once necessary to the prolonged value of the American dollar was thrown away in 1971, creating a fiat currency that is inevitable to fail. With these institutions put solidly into place, it created a sort of trifecta of centralized tyranny, social security system, factory school indoctrination, and enslavement to the federal bank. These are what I believe to be the fundaments of the Matrix. And eventually, throughout the 20th century, the people underneath governments would feel true tyrannical wrath underneath their own country's version of brainwashing and true oppression. Throughout the process of schooling, you are forced to comply with needless rules and boundaries conceived by authority figures whose day-to-day brainwashing of children is but second nature. They too were born into this factory, and they, with zealous intent, indoctrinate the young generations without ever questioning the system of lies that they perpetuate. Oftentimes, these lies come in the form of straight-up distortions or falsifying of history and knowledge. And one is shown from a young age that to act outside of the box and think for yourself is to be condemned and frowned upon. Many times when I myself was in school, I would purposefully do something with personalized creative intent, only to fail the project due to me not following the teacher's strict orders to a T. And it seemed that I was the only kid in school who questioned why it is that imagination was something to be shunned. Indeed, when I had a revelation of the true nature of the entrapment in the 7th grade, it caused me such mental strife that I had developed acute depression that persists even into my adulthood. Something had changed for me in that moment. I had always been different, and I had always, in the back of my mind, questioned these systems that I know now are part of the veil of illusion that is the Matrix. It is all falsity and illusion. And in making this video, I hope to make more individuals aware of these issues and hopefully spread the truth that this modern world we live in is a lie. The system is intently constructed to resemble linear boxes. From architecture, room structure, and curricular structure, it is clear that from preschool into the adult workforce, this matrix we live in, subliminally and sometimes brutally, nails into our heads to think narrow-mindedly and to avoid the natural structures of circular motions and waves. This matrix attempts to combat the universal force of chaos with straight lines that ultimately end up in mere human abstractions that only hurt the psyche and cause an inevitable clash with nature itself. That is something that is wholly unsustainable. Yet, the matrix indoctrinates us into the belief that fighting nature to an unhealthy degree is completely fine and that this is what we are here to do as humans. And due to ever-expanding and encroaching cities and suburbs, we have heavily dense population centers that, ironically, harbor the loneliest and most isolated generation in history. In the perpetual feeding of this false system known as the Matrix, we are nurturing an enslavement of the mind never before seen. And with ever-progressing technology, this dystopian surveillance state continues to grow on to horrifying proportions as the masses remain asleep to the truth of this brave new world. The city, a metropolis of commerce, work, and endless moving parts. What is it about the city that appeals so greatly to people? Well, I would say that cities do indeed offer more resources and opportunities for one to take advantage of. It is much easier to find both work and companionship within the concrete jungles of the modern world. A major portion of the human population resides within cities, and most grow up in them and learn to be accustomed to its hectic ways of life. We are taught that this is normal, that it is just dandy to never see the natural world and to live amongst the concrete, steel, and glass. Trees or plants may be placed, but these things are but mere facsimiles of the true natural world. And I would even argue that these decorations are an insult to our planet itself. Yet people prefer to live in the world of illusions that is the city. Ever since the first industrial revolution in the 18th and 19th century, urban areas have continued to grow and grow, destroying forests and rivers and polluting the ground that they were built on. All in the vein of building monoliths to a false system. A matrix that promotes and demands enslavement of the mind to its all-encompassing siren call of madness. To me, the city represents enslavement, a mass enslavement on a level never before seen in human history. A different kind of slavery to that of the chattel, built upon lies, coercion, and distraction. And as technology progresses, the more worse things will become. For all of the good that science has done for our world, it will in turn incur innumerable negative effects that will heavily outweigh any of the good that it has done. Science continues with no conscience, no morals, nothing to pull its reins back to a safe level, and now the puppet masters are in control of science. Authorities will do nothing but use it against the people of this age. They will lie, coerce, falsify, and alter reality in the name of the greater good. That greater good being under the guise of science. Carl Sagan had warned us of the effects that science, being under the control of governments, may have, that the ignorance of the masses mixed with over-controlled and politicized science will only lead to disaster. Cities lead to incredible levels of crime and violence. Cities breed disease and discontentment. And in their blatant Promethean protest of nature itself, they crush and suffocate all within their walls of confinement. There is nothing natural about cities, nothing natural about working 9 to 5 for meaningless paychecks to pay ultimately meaningless bills. Nothing natural about driving cars and being stuck in traffic jams. All of these things, all of the details, they all build up to create a tyrannical atmosphere that destroys people's ambitions and strengths. This in itself is the grand spell casted by the Matrix. Cities create systems that tell you to become someone you are not, to become a mindless worker bee in the hive. The system drives it into your brain that there is nothing sacred in this world, no divinity and no spirit, just lifeless material. And this lie is perpetuated to an extremely effective degree. How many people in this world even think for themselves, let alone attempt to break free from the systems that have oppressed them? Not many, for it is nearly impossible to wake up once you have been fully conditioned into the matrix. For first, you must bear witness in full to the illusion. It is obvious to those who have become awakened, however, that our current state is but a veil of lies. Hardly anyone understands just how fragile the system truly is, and the higher you climb, the further you have to fall. And yet, many still become completely incumbent on the system. They are told from the beginning that the system is their lifeline and they cannot survive without it. As these unnatural systems continue to grow and sap the life from humanity, it becomes more and more clear how easily everything falls apart. And those that control this world have no interest in you knowing and seeing such things. Things that would make you question the fragility of our own system. Riots, governmental failures, attacks on critical infrastructure, and much more are either suppressed, not shown at all, or are reported to be far less of an issue than they actually are. We are living a lie. This system of cities and technology will fail. Urban decay is inevitable. Even the greatest cities on the planet are bound to fall prey to the economic failure that leads to gang violence and decay of the spirit and morale of the people. Infrastructure will be abandoned, and the victims of this corrupt system will be the only ones left to pick up the pieces. At the end of everything, the corruption that you voted for and professed undying love for will only abandon you. Look at Detroit, for example, once one of the most wealthy cities on the planet, now rendered into little more than a decrepit war zone. The same could be said for San Francisco and Chicago. It all fell due to the aforementioned factors. To continue to run cities is to defy nature itself. And the more we defy nature, the greater her counterstroke shall be. As humans, we are meant to be free, to have the power and strength to carve our own destinies, to be able to freely pursue our goals and dreams without an oppressive system monitoring our every move and ensuring we can only do so much, for we are on a tight leash. Of course, I am not saying that you should go out to kill or conquer others at all or without recourse, but instead, that we should be able to do whatever our spirit and heart tells us we should do, so long as others are not hurt along the way. Yet the system and society we live in kills our individuality and creativity from a young age. This place does not care for our inner light. There is nothing to be gained by thinking outside of the box and being creative. Thus, many among our society will never reach their true potentials. Instead, they opt to act like other people, speak like other people, and work soul-crushing jobs for other people. For in this world, our true natures will be brutalized and tamed long before we ever reach any attainment of the self. The very roots of our system are blackened with a curse that speaks of inevitable failure and constant impending doom. To subjugate the masses is like caging a wild animal. They shall tolerate it for only so long before they begin to resort to drastic measures. As it is written in the Tao Te Ching, the more a government oppresses and creates laws, the more criminals and crime shall abound. And to quote Henry David Thoreau, that government which governs best governs least, and I should like to see it acted up to more rapidly and systematically. Carried out, it finally amounts to this, which also I believe, that government which governs best governs not at all. So then, how could we, as mere peasants, ever hope to become free from the thumb of this tyranny? Well, first, we must help spread the truth of this modern civilization, that it is broken to its core, that we are currently being oppressed in ever more elusive and coercive ways, and that we are in the midst of a fifth-generational war fought against the people directly by those in power. And that if we stand idly by and do nothing as our freedoms are trampled and thrown aside, we will lead ourselves into the jaws of our own slaughter. both metaphorically and potentially literally. In reality, I realize how difficult this actually is. I am not saying to at once conduct a violent uprising and revolution. However, I believe we must start living in certain ways that shall make it much harder for the government to continue to oppress us, such as the cessation of voting for fools, and to not count yourself among the wolves in sheep's clothing that are government agents and agencies. Do not participate in their dangerous game. If you can, and have the means to do so, move away from the city and maybe start a garden. Start in small ways at first, ways to steel yourself against the perpetual transmission of brainwashing and lies, such as cultivating strong morals. It matters not where the morals come from, but all that matters is that you bear them whilst acting them out and potentially teaching them to others, should they consent to listen. And it is of the utmost importance that we immediately refuse to put our children in the corrupt and indoctrinating state-mandated schooling system. A key method of escaping this matrix is to develop parallel societies. Societies that operate of their own accord, free from governmental squalor. Societies that promote and teach freedom and the ways of strength and wisdom, the ways of our ancestors. The more we as a collective of individuals, not sheep, begin to understand and follow our own spiritual paths, the more we shall become free of mind, and the more we shall break free of the fetters of indoctrination and brainwashing that has plagued us for far too long. Go now, find your path and follow it with truth and love in your heart, before it is too late, before the human itself will become but a relic of the past.